Corsair, our non-stimulant, thermogenic, and recomposition agent. Corsair is a super cool product because it's gonna help you utilize turning your white adipose tissue, which is for storage of fat, into brown adipose tissue, which is gonna help with energy production. So this is great to use for a competition prep or in your weight loss phase. So you can stack it with a stimulant-based thermogenic, or you could also use it in your off-season or muscle building phase to help keep you lean and mean. Corsair.
What is going on, you guys? Welcome back to the Pro Physique Code, your prep team, except we have a special guest this week. We have Mr. Steven with us in place of Paul. So how are you today, Steven? How was your birthday last week?
I mean, I just worked all day. Like, that's what I think this is the thing. So one, I feel like as a guy in his, I guess, almost late 30s now, the 37 counts late 30s, like my birthday doesn't actually matter anymore. So I literally just worked all day. Like that was it. That's all I did.
It's not your birthday week, Steven. It's your birthday month.
No. Yeah, it's your birthday. I've got to celebrate every day, right? I always get a kick out of people that do that because I've always been the opposite too. And I think I get it from my dad because I vividly remember one year it was his 50th birthday. And I remember that was like the summer I worked in his office and he didn't tell anybody it was his birthday. Obviously I knew. And all of the ladies that worked for him, I told them like in the middle of the day at lunch and they were like, oh my God, it's Jay's 50th birthday. And they like ran to the store and like got a ton of like surprise balloons and surprised him when he got back. But he just like doesn't tell anybody it's his birthday. He just doesn't care, I guess.
How mad at you was he for telling them all his birthday?
I don't think he was mad. I think the girls in the office, they felt so bad though, because, I think it's a girl thing. We want to make people feel special on their birthday, but I don't think he was mad. He doesn't really like, it's not that he dislikes attention. He's kind of like you. He's like, it's just another day. I'm going to work, just another day of life. So.
Well, it's weird. Like sometimes the attention almost makes me uncomfortable, like, especially like depending who it comes from. So for me, it's just like, I don't think it's that big of a deal. So when like other people make it into, I think too big of a deal, that's when like I start to get a little in with it. So like the people who are close to me, my in-laws, my family, like that's great. But, like sometimes if it's just like, I hate when people sing to me, like it's not my thing. So yeah.
Yeah. Is a little awkward. Yeah, the singing is a little awkward. Well, in today's podcast episode, we're going to talk about how not to F up your post show. So I'll kind of give a little background of why we're talking about this. I mean, it's important, but it was 2 weeks ago when we had the podcast episode talking about the decreasing bikini numbers, like at the national shows. A couple people had actually put in the comments that one of the reasons they thought that the numbers were declining, now I don't know if this is true or not, but I think it's a valid point, is that they were a little worried about like post-show and how they would like just how to navigate post-show, because I think that is kind of a scary time for people. And I know that we hear a lot of horror stories too about what can happen post-show. So we're going to talk specifically as coaches today about basically how not to screw up your post show, because I really think it starts way before post show. Like you have to prepare yourself in prep and even before prep if you want to have a successful post show.
Yeah.
No,
and
I mean, sorry, go ahead, Steven.
I was gonna say, I think that also goes to the idea of like there are a lot of people who do struggle post show, and we hear a lot of those horror stories. But I think that is a big part of it too, is because if you're so far off post show, like say you gained 50 pounds after your show over your stage weight, or say you gained like 40, 50 pounds and you didn't hit where you want to be in stage weight, and you associate prep with, 700 calories and 2 hours a day on the stairs, why would you ever do prep again? Right. So I think like there's also in this conversation, the space where we want to say, there is a better way to do things to where we can minimize those risks. We can minimize that like kind of blowback after the fact, and like make prep in and of itself a more positive experience, like overall, not even just in season, but out of season too.
That's exactly where I was going to even start with all of this is a lot of your post show is determined by how your prep goes. Obviously the number of times you competed, but if you have 50 pounds to lose, or let's say 30 pounds to lose as a female going into prep, and you're going to try to do that in 16 weeks, you think that reverse is going to be easy? It's not going to be easy. It's going to be almost impossible. So it's about giving you enough time in prep, making sure you get yourself prepped before you prep, and you can bring calories up towards the end. Being ready early is a big part of that, being able to get food up. Because if food is not up and then you open those floodgates post show, I don't care who you are, it is incredibly difficult.
I was
Yeah.
talking with the client the other day, and I kind of it's not the same, but like it's a mirror that like kind of helps you to maybe understand it. Like, and because like I've had a lot of history in like my life with people who have alcohol issues, right? And if somebody's recovering from alcohol abuse, the last thing that you would do for a lot of those people, if you have been like coming out of rehab or something, would be putting them back into the bar to go hang out with their friends. But like in the same vein, a lot of people will do that, but then they go right back out to the restaurant. Then they go right back to their food choices. So they go right back to that stuff. And it's like if your prep was crazy and you were so restrictive, like you might just not be ready for that too. So I feel like one of the big things is like how you prep starts it, but then you have to take that into account for how you're going to manage the reverse too. Because if you were on like that crazy low calories, you can't go back to what you were doing. You're going to put on weight. You're going to feel bad, and it's gonna be a problem, right? You're gonna have a bad time, as the ski instructor in South Park says. Versus like if you're eating into the show, one, you're probably already fuller. Your metabolic capacity is better. You haven't destroyed yourself going into it the same, and like you're actually set up. So like thinking about those things and planning ahead of time, which we don't always get to do, right? Like I work with people sometimes that are like 6 weeks out, 10 weeks out, and they come to us in a pretty bad spot. It's like, all right, let's see what we can do to make the best out of this. But for those people, the reverse tends to be so much harder, the post-show experience, versus people who maybe I got to deal with for the majority of prep to make sure that we were in a good spot or as good of a spot as possible.
Yeah,
Yeah, I
absolutely.
noticed
Sorry.
I noticed that too. And I think, it all starts too with, especially with newer competitors, managing those expectations right off the get-go and realizing that, okay, when you're reaching out for a coach, whether that's well before you want to start a prep or, a lot of cases when you get a lot of first-time competitors that reach out for a coach when they want to start prep. But I think it comes down to realizing, okay, don't look at it as just okay, 16 weeks to show day and then I'm let free and I can do whatever the hell I want, because you can do that, but that's when you're going to have that really tough time post show. I don't care what anybody says. I think some people think, oh no, I'll be fine, I have the discipline, but until you experience it for yourself, you just don't know how hard it can be. But I think it comes down to thinking, okay, yes, I'm maybe 16 weeks out from my show, but you can't just look at it as, like you said before, Stephen, life does not just go back to normal overnight, right? You kind of almost have to mentally think, okay, like build that framework of knowing that usually the first 6 to 8 weeks post show, you kind of have to look at that in the sense of being very similar to prep, where you're still being very diligent on your macros. Food is still not going to be super high, probably. At that point, you're going to have to slowly work it back up. You're going to have to slowly regain that balance. So if you can kind of think of it in that way, rather than, okay, once the show day hits, boom, I'm let free, but instead thinking, okay, ooh, that next 6 to 8 weeks post show is really vital, and I should kind of think of that as prep too. I think that's really important to consider. I know recently I've been having a lot of conversations with some girls on my roster who, we've been having conversations of if they want to prep or if they want to compete like later this year. And something I always bring up is, okay, well, if we're going to do a show, let's say in October, well, consider that like you're probably going to be in the very early onset stages of your reverse around the holidays. Are you willing to do that, right? Because some people, they're like, no, I don't want to have to worry about that around the holidays. Not something that it sounds like that's thinking really far in the future, but that's, you have to think in those terms if you want to set yourself up for success.
Yeah, and especially post show, it's if you're disciplined post show, most people, it doesn't take a ton of time to get your food up. It's just when you start going overboard and overboard and overboard and overboard, it gets hard. And even if it's around the holidays, look, you can enjoy yourself on Thanksgiving. You can enjoy yourself at these things. That's not a problem, but it's enjoying yourself on Thanksgiving and the next day and the next day and the next day and the next day that
Yep.
becomes the problem. And for a lot of people, it opens up the floodgates, right? Like they've been disciplined, and once you open those floodgates, it's hard to shut those gates. And there's a reason that's an analogy, open up the floodgates, because if you know how water works, it's impossible to shut it, right? It's too powerful. And go back kind of what Steven said, I work with a lot of people too who come off not necessarily the best situations, right? And you want to help them get the best that they can be. It's kind of like watching someone stand on a train tracks and just seeing a train barrel down, because you know what's going to happen post show. Like, you just know it. And you try to tell them, hey, I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, hey, I've committed to this show. I need to do this show. I'm like, okay, we can do it, but this, and this is things that need to be considered. Is it worth that? And most people say yes. And then it's like staring at the person on a train tracks, knowing what's probably going to happen post show. Because again, you don't know what you don't know, right? And this goes to a lot of first-time competitors with that. And it's hard, guys. It's look, the sport is hard for a reason. And it takes planning. But this is not something that, if you're a decent amount above your stage weight, it's not something I would just try to wing and white knuckle. That's not going to end out the best.
So I would almost say, like, I feel like a lot of it starts, and again, it's kind of like you said, before the prep, because the people who tend to be the most successful with not even just prep, but post show and just throughout the year are the ones who, like, and I love you guys. I think it's great if you want to, like, make a significant change and try and do something, but the people who really have the habits down, right? They're like, no matter whether they're in prep or whether they're not in prep, they're probably going to prioritize having veggies in their meal. No matter whether they're 2 years into an off season or improvement season, they're still going to be focused on lean proteins, right? They're still going to be mindful of the food choices they make and where their body composition's at, and fueling their performance and growth and doing those kinds of things. And I think for a lot of people that come in, especially newer competitors, like, we may not have that down pat the same as some of the people that we look up to or we admire or follow. And, like, that's not an easy thing to, like, recognize it because it's an interior and an internal thing, and it's not something you see on a regular basis so much. So, like, really getting that fact that, like, the most successful competitors, the people who are going to have the best reverses, are the ones who have focused on really truly, like, encompassing the, like, health and fitness lifestyle, but aren't necessarily just doing it to, like, make the transformation. Like, I feel like those are the individuals that tend to have the hardest time, because you buckle down and you have that, self-control, that determination for 12, 16, however many weeks, but it's not necessarily how you see yourself yet, and it's not necessarily part of your identity yet. So as soon as, like, the carrot on the stick of the show date or whatever is gone, you are back to those old habits, which are going to be more likely to cause the overeating, the excess weight gain, and the things that come along with it that, like, make that post show just that much more difficult.
Yeah, I think you hit on something super important there. It's just like living the lifestyle. And that's why, I don't know about you guys, but I'm really big on, before somebody even wants to compete, like, do you already live this lifestyle? Because in my opinion, I think that competing should just kind of be an extension of the lifestyle, or it's just kind of the cherry on top, right? It's a way to celebrate, to maybe push yourself that extra, little bit from what you're already doing, right? And I think that's why this sport attracts a lot of, like, former athletes, not all the time, but, like, I know for me in particular, when I was growing up in, like, gymnastics, I loved, like, the adrenaline that I got from those, like, competitions and the meets, right? And then growing up, like, going to the gym, it's kind of like the equivalent, like, bodybuilding shows are the equivalent to that, right? I get to kind of celebrate the lifestyle, and it's just an extension of that. But, I think that that's so important to have those kind of checks and balances in place first. Live the lifestyle for an extended period of time before you want to compete. Don't just go from, living life, maybe going to the gym whenever you feel like it, not tracking your macros, not even really paying attention to your diet, to, oh, I want to hire a coach. I really want to hunker down. I'm going to do this 16-week prep. Because, you'll probably be able to do that 16-week prep. But then, like, you said, Stephen, afterwards, because the lifestyle isn't really part of your identity yet, it's going to be a lot harder to just extend that lifestyle post show, right? And I think, like, with me in particular, and a lot of people who just live the lifestyle, post show is just, it's not that different, right? You're still going to wake up the next day, you're still going to live the lifestyle. I think we see it all the time too. Like, we'll see competitors, sometimes if I stay at, like, the host hotel, you'll see people the next morning in the gym doing their fasted cardio just because they want to. It's a part of their lifestyle. So I think that's a really big part of setting yourself up for success in the post show.
Yeah, I think you need at least one or two of them, right? I either think you need to have been training consistently for a while, or you have to have a handle on your nutrition. look, in a perfect world, you take both. I know me, for example, I didn't know what a macro was before I prepped for my first show, but I've trained my whole life with it. And I kind of learned that throughout the process of it. And it was kind of baptism by fire, or like drinking through a fire hose, whatever analogy you want to use for that. But I learned a lot and I learned quick, right? Now I continue to learn over that time period, but I also don't want people to think you have to have all these ducks in a row before you can even consider competing, because that's going to eliminate the vast majority of people out there. In a perfect world, yes, for sure with that, but also go with your eyes wide open. And then again, because I didn't have the nutrition check, because my body fat was a little higher, and because I wanted to do a show way quicker than I should have done, yeah, my reverse was not great. So I fell victim right into that too. But I did my best and I learned after that.
But that used to be how it was. Like, I know when I first got into the sport 10 years ago and did my first show, like, you didn't do you prepped for 12 weeks. You didn't prep for 16 weeks. You didn't prep for 20 weeks. You damn sure didn't prep for 24 weeks. You prepped for 12 weeks. And that was what you did. So, like, it was different then. And I think that the nice part is we definitely have more information now, because, like, say maybe you don't. And again, this is like ways to like make the post show the best it can be, right? I have yet to experience anybody have a perfect reverse. I think Sam is probably the closest um, of athletes I've had to what I would like consider like perfect. Like, she just nailed it. It was done. I've Most people don't have a perfect reverse. Like, but it's the same thing that we talk about in a lot of the other stuff. We're like, okay, it's not necessarily about being perfect. It's about being good enough. So if we can nail enough of these pieces, we should be able to manage good enough, which means we keep you in a better spot than you started. Because that's the other thing I think a lot of people forget is you get very like honed in on this show and your placement on this show and your competitiveness on this show. But like, all three of us know, like, this is a lifestyle sport. And the point is to come in better year after year after year and continue making progress. So sometimes, like, say, all right, I don't get to where I want to be this show, but I maintain 15 pounds leaner after I'm done with the show. Now, for the next time I compete in the next prep, I'm actually set up for more chances of success because I don't have to lose as much, like Evan was talking about earlier. So, like, you have to understand, like, there's going to be pieces of that, and talking to your coach and giving them enough time are all going to help you do that. Because, like, if you're doing a 12-week prep and you have a lot, or 16, the level of aggression that you would have to have for that diet to get as close to where you want to be is going to be much higher. Versus you take 20, 24 weeks, now maybe we can lose a pound a week. And this matters for your muscularity too, because if you don't have muscle to lose, you have to do a slower diet. You absolutely have to. And these are things that a lot of first-time competitors may not realize. And so that's why, like, that extra timeline is so nice, because it allows us to, one, talk about it, talk about maybe some of the considerations there, two, mentally prepare for it, which you might not even understand that your coach is trying to mentally prepare you for things by maybe what we focus on for goals, or the wins that we focus on, or some of the other things. I'm trying to mind ninja you. But like, that gives us time to really fill you out, so that we know, okay, how hard can I push them? How hard should I not push them? How do I think I'm going to get the best for them overall? So yeah, I want you to do as well as you can at the show, but it might also mean that we don't push quite as hard to do as well at this show, so that we can set you up to be for, in a better place for true success in the next season, and like really be aware of that, because that's a hard pill to swallow that most people don't want to accept, particularly for people that are trying to lose a lot going into shows, I feel like.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really keen insight there, Stephen. Especially, I think we can all tell when someone's siding down for a show who's going to be able to handle their reverse easier than others. And it's typically those who can kind of handle a little bit lower food, handle a little bit higher cardio, and not slip and not fall, and not ask for refeeds, or constantly focus on the hunger. If you're constantly focused on hunger in prep, that's why I'm so against like prep hacks and all that stuff. If you're constantly focused on the hunger, then you're going to be focused on that after. And also, a thing that people don't really understand is that ghrelin response is a physiological response. And when you try to feel full, it's like filling a jug of water with a bunch of holes in it. It's not going to happen. You're not going to get full.
Yeah,
You're
I'm
going to get
glad you brought
sick,
that up.
and it's
Mhm.
going to take days and days and days and days and days of that. Next thing you know, your kidneys hate you, your blood pressure hates you, your ankles hate you, everything hates you at that point with it.
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought up the ghrelin, because when I put up the question box in my story yesterday about what people were just generally worried about post show. Somebody brought up the fact, like, I wish I would have known, or not that I wish I would have known, but they're like, I think more people should know that post show your leptin and your ghrelin are completely out of whack, and they're going to be out of whack for a little bit of time. And you hear competitors say this a lot, where they're like, well, I'm eating more, but I'm hungrier. Like, what is going on? And I think it's important to just prepare yourself for that, and to know, okay, yeah, you could be eating more post show and even feel a little bit hungrier. That's not necessarily a bad thing. That doesn't mean, oh my God, you need to eat, your whole pantry, but just setting yourself up for success and knowing that. And like you said, Evan, not necessarily trying to, like, quote unquote, hack the system and chase fullness all the time, because, I think that there are little ways you can be strategic with your food, right? A little bit more fiber, maybe some more whole foods to keep you more satiated. But if you're if you're so hungry post show and you're filling all of your food with like a ton of shredded lettuce, a ton of 0 calorie this, 0 calorie that, you may feel a little bit fuller, but you're also probably going to wreck your digestion. Your stomach's going to be really distended. You're just going to feel uncomfortable. And that's not easy to sometimes see post show either. If your waistline is all drawn out. So, you have to kind of manage your expectations post show and know that hunger is going to be a lot higher for a little bit of time. It will eventually level off and come down, but that's just part of the process.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to like the physiology of it, right? Because technically, like, your ghrelin should be pretty stable. And ghrelin is what's secreted by your stomach, and that's what tells you you're hungry. And that's kind of always going. And so what blocks that is actually your leptin, and that's secreted by your fat cells. And the amount of leptin that is secreted by your fat cells is based on the size of the fat cells. So not necessarily how much body fat you have, but the size of the fat cells themselves. So like the hard part about post show is you can literally, and I've done it, so I can tell you, eat until you are painfully full. Your stomach hurts and still feel hungry.
Still want to eat.
Because your hormones are, like, they're imbalanced. They're not where they should be to promote normal hunger levels. And there are obviously other pieces of the puzzle there that are going to impact your hunger, like stress and sleep and some other things as well. But like, if you're expecting to be normal with your hunger signaling post show, it's just not going to happen, because the leaner you get, the lower body fat you have, the smaller those fat cells are, the less leptin you're going to secrete, the hungrier you are going to feel. And then I do think, like, so yeah, there's personality traits that affect that. I think genetics affect that a little bit as well, for maybe how aggressive that is for different individuals. And there are other hormones that, like, have a role in terms of your hunger signaling and stuff. But you have to know that coming out of the show, you are still going to be hungry. Even if maybe we do a great job and food's really high, there's still going to be some hunger there.
And a good example of this is anyone that's been in a prep before and been on low food for a little bit and gets a good sized refeed. How hungry are you the next day? Way worse, right? Way worse. If you're starting to get lean, at least, way worse. So imagine that with no carrot on the end of the stick at the end. That's pretty much what you're going to feel on most reverses. And it's hard to manage, guys. It is. And that's why things like meal timings are still important. Like making sure you spread your food out, making sure it's kind of even throughout the day. Because if you just try to save a bunch of food for the end of the day and throw it in, and that ghrelin response, you're going to eat that, and you're going to eat more and more. And like Steven said, I've had times, there was a time post show, I sat in bed, I ate a bunch of donuts, I got up in the middle of the night, threw up, laid back down, and ate more. It's not, listen, this is not a smart way to do things. And we say this because, well, at least I say it because I've been there before. I've done it. And it's not a fun place to be. So our goal is to try to help people not make the same mistakes we have.
Yeah, and it's probably very similar for guys, but like, I think with females, this is where you see, like, an instance like you had, Evan. Like, sometimes you see females doing this. Oh, hey, Pearl. Those of you watching on YouTube can see Evan's daughter. But no, I think that like from a female perspective, and you see this sometimes, and I hate this because it makes me really sad, but you'll see people completely overdo it post-show to the point where, you know, they're up like 10 pounds within, you know, 2 days. And then what happens is they fall into this almost like this deep depression, and then they disappear. And like that can be really hard, right? One of my, I would say, biggest recommendations, and I'm sure you guys probably feel very similar about this. I think we've all made this mistake at one point in time, but I'm not a big advocate for hoarding post-show treats like well before your show. I know you see a lot of people doing that, but you know, here's the problem with it is you have all those treats. Let's say you have like a freezer full or a pantry full, right? Well, you're not gonna be able to eat all those like the night post show, right? And so you're gonna be able to make what?
Bet
On it. Okay, well, some people can, but the thing is, if you have all of that food stashed and, you know, you still have it left over after your post show, it's just going to be staring at you in the face, and it's going to be really easy to fall down that wall or that, you know, that path of self-sabotage. So I typically say don't hoard post show treats. I mean, maybe have a couple things you want to have post show, but don't have like a freezer full or a pantry full, because I mean, that takes a lot of damn discipline to have that the first couple weeks post show, like just staring at you all the time, because you're going to have a taste of it. And then your brain is automatically going to crave more. You're going to probably overdo it. So I always recommend don't hoard post show treats, you know, maybe get a couple things, but don't have like a full on stash that's staring you in the face the first couple weeks post show.
I think, and I think you touched on it a little bit. I actually find that one of the things I think makes it harder is if you're too like sweet treat focused. And for me, I find that people who also like use a lot of the no calorie options tend to have more digestive issues, but more issues with not overdoing it post show. Whereas I feel like people who are much more like they're just not using as much, or they maybe don't even use any at all of like the fit foods, the low calorie options, the butter, like the fit butter stuff, all those kind of things, they just tend to do better because they're sticking to the majority of the same foods they were already eating, instead of always looking for the more like calorie dense option. Because after the show, you're normally not going to like overeat hard on the fit foods and the no calorie options. If you do, it's going to destroy your digestion typically. And then if you go to the other stuff, well, then those are all the really calorie dense options that also are going to be like, okay, now this is where I'm going to see the body fat regain happening much more quickly. So for me, a lot of the times I honestly try to get people to avoid a lot of those things as much as possible. And I know the creamies are like huge and super popular. I think there's a place for that stuff, but I have seen so many people that do too much of it and really like dig themselves into a sweet tooth hole with that, instead of being a lot more modest or moderate about it and like really focusing on the whole foods, which I also do believe like changes that mindset coming out of the diet too.
And look,
It's
Ninja
really
Creamies can be incredibly beneficial. You don't have to put a million things in there. You can put protein and water and put it in there. It tastes pretty damn good, guys. You don't have to put a
oh
million
yeah,
different things in there.
I do like my creamy base is just protein, almond milk, and then a little bit of sugar-free pudding mix. Not a ton, but you need that to like make it creamy or make it like cream, I guess. But I find that having too many sweets post show, at least for me, it's like the more you eat it, the more you crave it, right? It's just those hyper palatable foods. I mean, I wish it was as easy as just having a taste of something, but you have that first taste of something super hyper palatable or something super sweet, and your brain automatically wants more, right? Like you crave it, you want more and more and more, and it's hard to stop at just one Oreo or two Oreos, right? So you know, I think that I don't want to say you can't treat yourself a little bit like post show at night, but I mean, if you can limit those foods as much as possible the first several weeks post show, and give your body, give your hunger hormones a little bit of time to level off a little bit, I think that's smart. And sticking with primarily lots of whole foods post show, because just the more you eat sweet things, the more you're going to crave it. I know in particular for me, like I like stevia, and I really only use it in my coffee, but like Evan, I know you like stevia, but the
I've
more
cut
I
down.
use it, you cut down, yeah. Well,
I've
and it's
cut
not
down.
a bad thing. it's not a bad thing, but like you can probably attest to this, that the more you use stevia, like it's almost like you have to continue to add it because your taste buds adapt, and they just, and then, you know, they want, it's a very interesting thing how your palate adapts, and you have to kind of build on that habit. So yeah, if you can just avoid a lot of sweets post show and stick with lots of whole foods, I think that you know, that generally helps with like the cravings and the thoughts around food and the food focus.
So I
Yeah,
think that's a good point that you make, because like the stevia, the sriracha, or the sweet and low, the Splenda, those are significantly sweeter than real sugar. And so like for me, when I'm in prep, I eat real sugar in prep, but I'll get like a couple of those little like Dove chocolate squares. And so I might have like 2 to 4 of them per day, depending on how I'm feeling. But I'm also used to that in prep, so that now I know I can just have a couple. I can have one cookie. I can have a couple pieces of chocolate. I've already established like the self-control with the signaling with that. And like this is where, and because I don't think there's anything wrong with Splenda. I don't think there's anything wrong with Sweet and Low. I don't think there's anything wrong with the sunflower one that you were just talking about that I, for some reason, cannot recall the name in my brain.
Stevia?
That one. It's from sunflowers.
Oh, okay.
But I think the amount that you use of those can absolutely impact how you perceive sweet things, especially when you go to those higher calorie foods. And then the one that I am actually like, so the creamies, it doesn't concern me unless you're essentially making like your own Halo top with it all the time, right? Like that's where it gets me. But the one I do really watch out for are things like the syrups, the Walden Farms things, like the Fit Butters, because we have seen in the past that some of those do not have correct information anyways. Some of the other like fit food treats have had incorrect nutrition information where the calories have been much higher. But the sugar alcohols and some of those things can really hit digestion hard. And that I think is another, like the big part of why I try to say, be very sparing or very intentional about how you use that stuff. Because if you're not thinking about it and you're just trying to band-aid something the whole time, you can be like setting yourself up for failure coming out of things.
I think two things
Yeah.
that really mess people up post show is exactly what you're talking about, guys, with the artificial sweeteners and the fake foods. I even make it a larger umbrella with that and just say processed foods, because most people stick to more whole foods towards the end of their diet. And then when they start introducing a bunch of processed foods again, their digestion gets wrecked up. It just does not feel good. You overeat on it, then your digestion's messed up. You're like, okay, but I'm hungry and I want to eat something, and eating like a chicken or rice does not sound good at that point. So you go back to the more stuff. It's like it spirals. And then the other part are your family and your friends. So you may want to stick to your plan post show, but then you're going to have everybody and their brother saying, you've done all this. You deserve this. You deserve this. You've earned this. Those terms just kind of drive me up the wall sometimes. It's like, no, you've earned and deserve the right to take care of your body. And whatever that is to you, that's fine. But our job as a coach is to make sure that it's as healthy as humanly possible with that. Yeah, enjoy yourself with it. But, you know, and even preparing for those situations is smart, right? So if you go in and you know you're going to your parents' house, you know how they're going to be, go ahead and have an answer ready for them. Like, don't go in blind, because if you go in blind, you're going to cave. You got to go in with a plan
Right.
for some of this stuff. And just initially, guys, this is not something that you have to do time after time after time after time again. People get conditioned to how you live your life.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point you bring up about friends and family, because I'll hear this sometimes from, you know, competitors. They're like, well, my work, you know, they want to, you know, treat me after I prep, and we're going to go out to lunch, or they're going to have a big party for me or whatnot. And I think part of it is like, you have to do your due diligence as an athlete and set those expectations with your family, with your coworkers, with your friends, right? It's not just, you know, because I think sometimes the way they interpret it is, okay, well, so-and-so, she's prepping for the show. And yeah, they do interpret it a lot of times as, okay, once she gets the show done with, she can go back to living her life normal, right? But that's not the case. And so we have to do our due diligence as an athlete to, you know, to communicate that with those around us. And like you said, Evan, usually the more you condition those around you that like, this is the lifestyle you live, you know, you're not somebody who's just in it for 12 weeks and then, you know, you're going to go back to normal afterwards. Like, the more accepting they become. I know my mom used to be so unsupportive of this lifestyle when I first started it, but now, like 5 years later, she doesn't, I mean, doesn't even question it. You know, she'll order pizza, or my stepdad will order pizza, and it's, you know, they don't even ask if I want anything now, because they just know, okay, nope, Lexie will take care of herself. So the more you live this lifestyle, and, you know, that reflects around the people that you love, they'll be a lot more, I would say, accepting of just the lifestyle you live and who you are.
Well,
And
tell
look, you
them
can
I will
have
still
pizza
eat
post
pizza
show.
with them.
Yeah, you
What?
can eat pizza post show. You just don't want to eat the whole pizza post show,
Right.
right? Like
Right.
enjoy stuff with your family.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, and I think that it's just important to have those boundaries with them. If you are, you know, if you are experiencing people who are like thinking that post show or post prep, you're going to be able to just go out to eat all the time and just, you know, do whatever you want. Like, if that's not what you want to do, have those boundaries with them. That is okay. Like you said, Evan, you deserve it to yourself to prioritize your health post show as well.
I think how you communicate that matters too. I know, like, we've talked about this a lot in other facets of things, but I think the challenge for a lot of our families and friends is that they think that when we're prepping, we can't. They're like, oh, they can't have pizza. They can't have cake. They can't have a drink. They can't. Like, somehow we've lost our ability to. When the truth of the matter is, yeah, we always were able to have that stuff. It was always on the table. We've just chosen not to do it because of our goals or the things that we are stating are important to us and that we're trying to back up with our actions. And so I think most people get valid and reasonable concern if they're like, oh my God, she can't have a piece of cake. She can't have a drink with us. She can't. Like, I would be fucking concerned for somebody too. I'd be like, oh my God, what's wrong? Why can't you have these things? Versus if, like, no, I just don't want that right now. Or, you know, it doesn't really support what I'm trying to do with, you know, X, Y, or Z right now. It's a completely different picture that it paints in my mind receiving that on how I can interpret that. So I do think that there are some things that we can do in how we communicate with the people around us to help ease that kind of change socially and with our relationships to help us find more support. Because if they say, or they think we can't, like, they want us to be able to have the freedoms of a normal human and adult and all that kind of stuff anyways. So it would make sense that they would push for that and be concerned about it. Like, especially if they care about us.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
that's a
and
great.
like a lot of people that don't understand this stuff, right? Like our friends and our families, they almost look at it like it's like a cult thing, right? Like it's something that's not good for us. Like it's not good for our psyche with it. Like it's not something we actually want to do.
How cool would that be if it was a cult and we didn't have to pay taxes?
That would be,
Oh
that we could be a
God,
religion.
love
We need to be,
that.
bodybuilding needs to be a religion.
I always say that's my least favorite three-letter word. Well, you brought up a great point, Stephen, about the like, I think it's a connotation thing too. And I always say, when like you're around your friends and your family, and if you are in prep, even if you're having a really low day, you're really miserable, you don't want to eat your meal prep, you don't want to have to do your cardio, the way, like, your connotation towards those actions really matters, right? So for example, you know, if you're around your family and you're like, oh, I gotta go do my cardio, I'm sorry, I can't, you know, can't spend the day with you and go, you know, wherever it is, I have to go do my cardio, I have to go train. Like, no, you don't have to go and do that, you get to, right? And even if you don't want to do it that day, at least put a little bit of positivity behind it, because if your family constantly gets used to you just saying, oh, I gotta go do my cardio, and like you're acting like it's the end of the world, well then of course they're not, like, they're gonna feel bad for you. They're gonna be like, why the hell are you just like, why are you doing this to yourself, right? But if you act like, no, I'm choosing to do this, I really enjoy doing it, I really enjoy eating my meal prep, I really, you know, I want to go to the gym, I want to do my cardio, they're gonna be a lot more, I think, likely to accept you, and because they see that what you're doing makes you happy, right? So if you're acting miserable all the time around them with what you're doing with your prep needs, well then of course post show they're gonna, you know, probably want you to have more freedom, because they're gonna be like, why were you, you know, they're just gonna, they saw how miserable you were in prep, therefore they want you to be a little bit happier outside of prep. So I think connotation around your prep demands is really, really important around those that, you know, that you spend time around, your friends, your family, etc.
Yeah, if you got plans with your family, guys, and you have your cardio, and it's important for you to do your cardio with it. Look, if you skip your cardio one day, is it going to throw off your whole reverse? No, it's not. But if you skip it every day, it will throw off your reverse. And if you're the type of person that if you skip one day, it leads into two, leads into three, leads into four. If you're that type of person, you know that, then stick to it. But here's the deal: if you have plans with your family, get your ass up a little bit earlier, go do that cardio first, then go spend time with your family. Don't use it as an excuse.
I don't need an
Exactly.
excuse not to spend time with my family. I've lived a whole life with them. That's the only excuse I need. But like
Fair
real
enough.
talk, like as coaches, we also want you to get back to higher calories, less cardio, feeling good, normal healthy body fat percentages just as much as anyone else. It doesn't do me any good to keep you stage lean because I know that when I'm stage lean, I'm pissy and I complain a lot more and probably not as fun to coach. Um, so like if anybody's like me, I'm like, okay, not only do I want you to be healthy, to be able to enjoy life, to have as much of the freedoms as you possibly can, to perform well, to grow, to have better mood state, to have better libido, to be more efficient at work, to do all like, I want all these things for you. And I know that all of us as coaches, we want those things for you. So none of us are like trying to keep your calories low or keep your cardio high for any reason whatsoever when the show's over. Like our goal is the same. We want to restore you to optimal, like as much as possible and hopefully as
And I,
quickly as possible.
right. And I think something really important to put out there too, because I think we all understand this as coaches, but sometimes clients don't. And I think this may help some people to understand things a little bit better. But if you want to, I mean, we all see those girls out there or guys who, it's a month post show and they're eating 2.5 times what they were eating in prep. But in order to get that rapid, uptake of calories, you have to be consistent in the first place, right? So as a coach, as a client, if you check in and you report to your coach, hey, I didn't hit my macros this week that you gave me in my first week of the reverse. Well, as a coach, we're probably most of the time going to say, all right, well, we're not going to change anything this week. Let's keep macros where they're at. And let's focus on hitting them, right? And so it's hard for us to really increase your calorie intake if you're not being consistent in the first place, right? So I always tell my girls, like, the more consistent you are post show, 9 times out of 10, the quicker we're going to be able to get your calorie intake up, right? So, if you're just eating whatever the hell you want every week and expecting your coach to still increase your calories, even though you're not following the plan, I mean, it doesn't work that way. It doesn't. So realize the more consistent you are and diligent to hitting those prescribed numbers, typically the quicker as coaches, we're going to be able to increase your calories. And like Steven said, we want to be able to increase your food. We want you eating a good amount, but that you also have to do your part and stay consistent in order for that to happen.
Yeah, we can't increase your calories if you don't stick to the plan. You overeat. Like I mean, we can to a certain extent with it to try to meet you in the middle, but it's one of those things. Like a big thing post show is getting people's food up, and they want free meals tossed in with that too. And if you want free meals tossed in with that and you go overboard on the free meals and then your calories are high, guess what happens? It's not one or the other when it comes to stuff. Like you have to be smart with this.
Yeah. And I think Evan touches on a good point because as the cat creating problems in the background, he's still going after it.
Trying to
Right.
I know.
No.
But like, so at a certain point, if you're not hitting your macros in reverse, I have a choice, or we have a choice as a team. Whereas we can say, hey, you got to hit your macros and I'm not going to change them. Or we're going to say, hey, it's probably going to mean that we might gain some more body fat, but let's increase these numbers to something that we think is realistic. Because if you're not hitting your numbers on a regular basis, that's tough, right? It's almost can feel like you're losing each day. So if we're going to gain weight, and regardless, I would rather gain weight and hit numbers and have some semblance of wins there than say, hey, let's just keep these numbers stable because you're not hitting them, and then just have consistent losses. Because I feel like that's where a lot of people tend to fall off. But the other thing that comes with that is honest communication with us in the coach-client relationship. And I get it because I just picked up a new athlete. They were 6 weeks out from a show, not in the greatest spot. And, if they went over, the coach literally yelled at them, screamed at, like, it was a local coach. The coach, it's halfway across the world, was screaming at them in the office and then telling them that they're going to have to do 2 hours of stairs and 500 calories a day and all this other like crazy shit. And it's like, it's not just on you, right? It's also on us as coaches to provide an environment where you feel comfortable to tell us the truth and know that you're not going to get some kind of nonsensical response like that from us. But we need you to tell us what's going on, because sometimes the right answer might be, yes, keep calories stable. What's happening? Like, what's causing the overeating? Is it a stressor that we can be a little bit more aware of? Are we noticing that we're running into like a stumbling block with maybe some social situations or other things where we can change how we're viewing it, or maybe change how we're approaching that situation and then be successful through that? And then other times the answer might literally just be, okay, cool. We need to just be a little bit more aggressive on how we're bringing up calories right now. Yes, we're going to put on some more body fat. It will mean that we're going to have to be less aggressive later on. And once we really start seeing things like chillax, but we never know any of that unless you really give us that good communication. And that doesn't mean just like, yeah, overate on Sunday, coach, my bad.
Yeah, that's a great point. Communication is so, so vital. And I think sometimes, I think we all have most of the time, most people have great intentions with communication. But I think that sometimes post show, as a competitor, if we, quote unquote, mess up, we're almost a little afraid to let down our coach, right? And so sometimes it's not easy to be open and to say, hey, I messed up or I screwed up, especially if you're somebody who literally nailed every day in your prep, right? Like you're so used to that identity of being that perfectionist. And sometimes it can be a little, nerve wracking to admit to your coach, oh my gosh, like I'm no longer that person. I messed up, right? But that will only help you as an athlete, right? Because we can only go off of what we have communication wise and, what you tell us. And, and I think that communication, I mean, it's always important in the client coach relationship, but it is especially important post show, right? And, as you kind of alluded to, Stephen, if you are somebody you're really struggling and, you would prefer a little bit higher calories and okay, well, higher calories may equate to a little bit of excess, or not excess, but quicker weight gain, but you're okay with that, bring it up to your coach, propose the idea of, hey, could we maybe increase my food a little bit quicker? Just don't be afraid to have that conversation.
Mhm.
What's the worst thing your coach could say? No, and they may explain why they give you that answer. But I think, don't be afraid to have that communication with your coach post show. And I think that leads me to, something else I definitely want to hit on before the end of this podcast, but that is, and I think both of you guys will agree with me on this, stay with your coach post show. I mean,
No,
I know that competing.
sorry.
I know, yeah,
Yeah.
ghost your show or ghost your coach after a show. That's exactly what you should do. No, but like, I get it. I know competing is very expensive. And I know some people after the show, they're like, oh, I need to save money. I'm going to, have to discontinue coaching. But guys, please, please, please try and stay with your coach at least minimum 6 to 8 weeks post show if you can. I mean, in a perfect world, stay with your coach year round, but you definitely don't want to just, say, hey, see you later after your show and go off out on your own, because that is probably not going to end well. So if there is one big takeaway you could take from this podcast, like plan to stay with your coach at least 6 to 8ish weeks post show. I think that's a very vital time.
It just gives you more accountability.
Yeah.
And so it keeps you invested in the process, which I think there's very much something to be said for that. Whether that's, yes, your emotional investment, your time investment, your financial investment, like the more investment I have in something, the more likely I am to do that. I'm fairly certain that's the only reason I graduated college, is because I was paying out of pocket. And I was like, F no, I paid $1,200 for this semester. Ain't no way I'm getting an F. I was like, I'm getting A's and B's, sucker. So like that was a motivating factor for me. And like, so having maybe some skin in the game still absolutely can be a benefit there. And then having somebody that has been through it, obviously, multiple times, who has helped other people navigate through it, like it might just help you to see some other things that you can do, other ways of addressing things, other ways of seeing or viewing things that help you to be more successful as well. And of course, I hate it when my clients feel like they're disappointing me. Like I'm never disappointed in you. The only time I would ever be disappointed is if I felt like you were giving me less than your best. If you were giving me your best, like that is all I'm ever asking for. And at the end of the day, as your coach, like it don't affect me the way it affects you. It's your day-to-day life. So like my concern with that would be like you're more concerned about my opinion of this situation than you are about how you're living your life and you feeling about that. So I don't want you to ever put like, or try and think that you need to put my being disappointed in you ahead of being open and honest and like talking about what's going on and communicating those things. So like having that support and having those people that you know are in your corner to try and help you and get the best out of the situation, I do think absolutely makes a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, typically the only time I get disappointed like is if someone just lies to me and it is not telling me the truth. That is incredibly frustrating as a coach. Look, if to any of my clients out there, to anyone out there, don't assume something about your coach. If you bring up something and your coach bites your head off, then, well, you have a decision to make at that point, because a coach shouldn't bite your head off. A coach can always be honest. I'll always be honest with you, but I won't bite your head off. Look, this is your life. Like I said, I'm like a GPS, right? I just help guide you to where you want to go with this. I'm not Uber. I don't pick you up and drive you there. Like, you still got to drive yourself there. And I'm happy to give you direction on that. So when things go wrong, I can give you direction on how to get it right back on track. But give us opportunities first. And remember, we're not there with you. We don't see these things. If you're like, I'm following the plan exactly, but I'm doing this, and this on top of that, then you're not, right? And so look, some of that stuff that you're doing may not necessarily be the worst thing either. There's sometimes that I've had clients increase some cardio a little bit, and hey, look, we're trying to get a fat loss phase in here, and yeah, I'm not complaining about that. You want to go for that? Let's go for that. Let's raise it up. I got no issue with that. But there's other times I'm like, no, we need to back it down. I see that a lot in training, is when people will feel like they have to train, and they'll train 5 days in a row, and they'll train upper body, lower body, upper body, lower body, lower body. I'm like, that's literally 3 lower body days in 5 days. That's not going to do anything for you. It's going to negatively impact you, right? So a lot of times effort does not always equal results on things, and good intentions do not always equal results. And it's one of those things. I understand, like, people have good intentions with it, but that's what we're here for, right? Is to help guide you with those things. So give us opportunities to prove to you we are not going to bite your head off. There are some out there that are like that. I just don't associate with any of those coaches, but there are some out there.
Oh, yeah, unfortunately there are. Yeah. But I think a big thing that I like to do with a lot of my clients, especially if it's like a first prep we've done, post show, if we know that, they just did a show, we know that we're going to probably wrap up the season after that. Usually I'll try to schedule a call within, like, could be the next day or within at least the next week, just to talk, first off, talk about how did the show go? What was the experience like, etc. Especially if I wasn't there with them in person, but to also like talk through, like, what are some goals you have for this next season and this next phase, right? And I'm not even just talking like bodybuilding goals, right? Obviously, that's going to be a big part of what our goals are based on is, okay, what was your feedback from your show? What do we need to work on? What do we need to improve? But what are some other goals that you have for yourself, right? Maybe it's life goals. Maybe it's career goals. Maybe it's, hey, I have some strength goals I really want to go after. Or Lexie, I kind of want to try this style of training. Like, I think sometimes having that phone call or, having that conversation shortly after your show and talking about some of those goals you have for yourself, even outside of bodybuilding, that can be a really great way to kind of keep you reined in and to keep you focused on having some sort of goal, right? Because I feel like where a lot of people struggle is they work so hard for that show date or those show dates, and then boom, the moment that last show is over, it's like, okay, you feel like you just like, what are you working towards now, right? Some people don't struggle with it as much as others do, but I think it can be really helpful to at least put some other goals in place post-show. That way you have something that you immediately feel like, okay, I have something that I'm still working towards. It's a different goal, but I still feel like I have something that is worth fighting for and that's, that I'm working towards.
Yeah. And I think, so this is one, because I know we're probably getting close to where we're going to need to end the podcast soon because we're talking a lot. But one I think a lot of people don't pay attention to that can increase your hunger signaling exponentially. When you get post-show and you have some extra food and you start going hard on all of your training, like, that can absolutely increase your hunger signaling more. Like, you're like, oh, I felt really good like before the end of the show, but now I'm training really hard, making sure I'm putting all this extra food to work to build all this extra muscle now. And now I'm overeating. I was like, yeah, well, I mean, you went from like 20 miles an hour to 80 miles an hour. Maybe slow that back down. So maybe don't do everything you possibly can do, leaving everything in the gym. Maybe just do a little bit more than you did last time. So we're still like progressively overloading. We're still making progress, but we're not doing it to such a degree where you're creating so much physiological stress to where your hunger signaling is now going up through the roof because of all of that extra added stress.
Yeah, That's a great point. Yeah.
Very good point.
I want to touch on one more thing too that I actually somebody put this on Instagram and I thought it would be worth maybe touching on. So somebody said that one of the things that they kind of struggle with is people scrutinizing like weight gain, even though it's necessary post show, but feeling like some people are maybe judging them for like, oh, you're being sloppy or you're falling off. And I don't think this happens for everybody, but I think sometimes it is a thought like post show when when you're gaining weight, if you think about, oh, people are going to think I'm, being sloppy or I've fallen off, especially people that don't really understand the sport and don't understand that like weight gain is a necessary part of it. Do you guys, I mean, I don't know if it's as much of like a guy thing as it is a female thing, but do you guys have anything that you tell your clients to kind of help with that besides just like screw what other people say?
I mean,
Because I feel like that would
depends
be.
it depends what kind of weight gain we're talking about too. It's like our job as a coach is to be objective, right? It is. And weight gain is necessary. Weight needs to go up. It absolutely does. It can go up quick and stabilize, or it can go up slowly with that. But yes, weight gain is absolutely needed. I actually end up struggling with almost extremes. It's when it comes to female competitors. Either they want to stay near their stage weight and it is a struggle to try to get them to put on more weight, or they want to put on weight really, really quickly with that. It's normally one or the other. And if it's the other where it's the weight on the quickly part. Look, after a show, when you, depending on how hard you've dieted, your metabolism is going to be down regulated to some extent with it. And you have to be aware of that. You have to be aware of that. But when it comes to, I mean, it's unfortunately it's kind of one or the other when it comes to that.
I think so. For me, it is 100% different for males versus females. Like, it is socially acceptable for me to be overweight and still handsome and still like have all these things, traditionally speaking, as a male. Whereas traditionally speaking as a female, and whereas I do think that we are making progress on this, it has not been. Females tend to have had their worth associated with things like the number on the scale and very much so visual aspects. So I don't think for a male I can say that I truly get it. I think some guys might get it just based on their experiences and how they evaluate themselves, those kind of things. But I don't know that it would be fair to me to say I haven't had the same kind of social experiences for the 37 years that I've lived life that I know that my female counterparts have if they're the same age, and even longer if they're older. So hard to say it's even or fair there.
Yeah, I think it's hard to like, so as a female, I would say even with like gaining I mean, everybody's going to gain a little bit of a different amount of weight in their off season, right? It really just depends upon the body type, the person, what the goal is, right? Those who have more muscle to build usually are going to have to probably gain a little bit more. But I don't know about you guys, but I find that even like females, even when you aren't your stage weight, even when you're maybe at the peak of your reverse diet and building phase, you still look like an athlete. It's not like you look like somebody who doesn't train, right? We're so used to seeing ourselves at that stage level of leanness that I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that even though you may gain 10 pounds, maybe even 15 pounds, you probably still look like an athlete, right? You're not, no, of course you're not as like, lean and strident and vascular, but you are still like the 0.05% of the population, right? You still look like an athlete, right? You're still going to have maybe some lines. You're still going to have that muscle definition to a degree. So, if anybody wants to give you slack for, not being your leanest self, like consider maybe those are people you don't need to associate with, or those are people you don't need to have in your life, right? Because usually you're still going to look like an athlete in the off season, just unless like you completely just go haywire and gain too much weight. There's that side of things, but most of the time, even people who are gaining, 10, 15 pounds in their off season, they're still going to look like an athlete by nature at that weight.
And another thing too is if you have body image issues as a female when it comes to your weight and you get down to stage lean, it can screw with your mind when any change happens. Any change. You can even put on 5-10 pounds and look way better than you ever have in your entire life before you ever walked into bodybuilding and feel like you're like a water buffalo. You are not. You are not.
I mean, I think most people that are in our sport have body dysmorphia to some degree.
Yeah.
Like, because I don't see myself in the aspect of, or unless I really take a step back and objectively say, "All right, I'm going to go out to the beach, I'm going to go to Walmart, I'm going to go to the mall," and be like, "Oh, wow, I'm in really good shape in comparison to the vast majority of people in the world." I look at it and I think this is maybe where some of it comes from, as when we get on stage, people are like, "Oh my God, that's the best I've ever looked. Oh my God, you look so amazing. Oh my gosh, this, oh my," and so we then get into this idealization that the stage lean and the stage look is quote unquote the best I've ever looked, which that's simply just an opinion based on, probably it could be our own opinion even, but that's certainly also not supportive of health. And there are going to be plenty of other people out there that will have a very different opinion and be like, "Yeah, that looks not for me, but when you're like 15 or 20 pounds above that stage weight, I think that's the best you've ever looked." And so we have to understand also that like our sport is in fact subjective. It is an opinion. It is based on like the rules and the criteria that they've developed. But it doesn't actually mean that like that's how we have to see ourselves at all times. And if we're aware of that, we can kind of take a step back and be like, "All right, cool, that's my best stage look that I've ever had." Or maybe that's the best I ever felt like I've looked. Great. Awesome. But we also need to know that like that's not real life. Like that's stage, and it takes a long time to get there. And if you try and stay there, like just bad things happen. So you
For
do
sure.
need to get comfortable with getting away from the idea that that's the only way that you look good, or that's the only way that you're attractive, or the only way that you have worth, or the only way that like you can be happy with your physique, because that is a surefire way for like problems.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And don't be afraid to, I think like, to kind of wrap things up, don't be afraid post show if you really are struggling, especially from a mental standpoint, whether it be with what we just talked about, like your self-worth base, or you're basing your self-worth off of that stage weight or how you look on stage, or if you're struggling a little bit with maybe just some relationship with food stuff, like don't be afraid to reach out for help. We have Danica Johnson on our team who helps out with a lot of mindset work. Like there's a lot of people out there that, in this industry who help out specifically with that. So I know I've had girls in particular in the past who have worked, with somebody like that along with me. And so don't be afraid to reach out for that type of help if you need it. That can be, a really good asset and can be great value post show too.
For sure.
Yeah. Pearl is, she's asleep now back behind you.
Yes, she is. Not terrorizing
She,
something, so I'll take it.
it's funny. Well, any last thoughts you guys have on this topic?
I think we covered a lot of good stuff here.
Chicken tendies.
I think we did. Yeah, I think we covered some good stuff. And thanks for joining us last minute, Stephen. We appreciate it.
Hey, I appreciate you texting me to give me at least a couple hours of a heads up.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Well, for those of you guys that are listening, it was Paul couldn't make it today. And there was a little miscommunication. He said Stephen was going to cover him for today, but Stephen didn't know that until this morning, until I texted him. So we're glad he joined us and it all worked out. So if you guys enjoyed this podcast episode, we would love it if you commented on the YouTube or just shared this episode to your stories on Instagram, tagged us, let us know what your favorite part was, or if there's any topics you guys want us to cover in a future episode, we'd love to hear that as well. But that's all I got. So I don't know if you guys have anything else, but that's all I got.
That's it.
Like and subscribe.